Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to a brand new show here on the channel. And the idea for this came from my two co-hosts here, the two guys in the co-captain's chairs. You've seen them both from In the Prog Scene and Guitarist Corner and Hudson Valley Squares and various shows on the channel. Mr. George Lamie and Mr. Eric Porter. Greetings, gentlemen. It's Friday, new show. The show is called, just so you know, 4Fusion Friday. And I guess we're going to go with the number 4 Fusion Friday. There's a reason why we picked 4, because basically all of these episodes, and these will be running once a month. They'll be on Fridays. This will generally come after Friday Morning at the Funhouse with Martin Popoff. And these shows are going to be based on 4 Fusion albums from any year, any decade. They're going to kind of be related in a certain way. There'll be something that kind of ties them all together. Could be some musicians who appear on them, could be the year of release, whatever. That's something that's going to be determined for each episode. We'll give you the whole layout of why we're choosing the 4 that we are. In addition to that, we're going to be, each episode, we're going to talk about one new release that we're all kind of digging on at that particular time. We're going to talk about why you guys should be checking it out as well. And in addition to all that, and I'm going to have George kick this episode off, George is going to be giving some recommendations of stuff that we all should be listening to, because George is the man when it comes to obscure and cool fusion music that I think everybody needs to be aware of. So with all that being said, George, I'll turn it over to you to get us started before we get into our 4 albums of today. So what do you got for us?
Oh, we figured we should start out with a segment covering new releases, you know, the pulse of the scene.
Yep.
I would say the flagship release so far this year for the genre is the Simon Phillips record, Protocol 5. I know you did a video review and Eric reviewed it for the site, but I figured I'd weigh in. Just like you guys, I like it. I had some initial trepidation because Protocol 4 was my favorite up until then, and they changed the guitar player. I thought Greg Howe had a big part of that. So, and they added a 5th guy and a sax player. So, you know, you're never sure, but my fears were allayed. It's a really good record. I assume it's still sitting well with you guys.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
I kind of like the sax addition to the band.
Yeah, it's different. You know? He's had so many records with just the quartet, so it is.
I will say the new guitar player is pretty I mean, you know, come on, this is Simon. Simon's not going to bring someone in that's not a top-notch player. So, you know, Alex is he's the real deal. He's the real deal.
Absolutely. And I've been checking out, I know he just, well, not just, but he's put out a couple videos. And I think, what is it? The Closer, The Long Road Home is fairly recent, but I agree with you, Pete and George, that I had just really gotten into this band through George, and I loved 4 and I loved Greg Howe, and Alex still is fantastic. And I think it's Jacob Cessny is the sax player, and they do a lot of unison lines together, but it's, you only have to listen to the first 2 tracks, in my opinion. And they kick it off with that Jagannath and Isosceles, and they're both fantastic. And the rest of the record follows suit.
Yeah. I just wanted to touch on a few other ones that have come out this year. Juan Cortez Womeru is probably the first thing that came out. He's his first solo album from a Argentinian guitar player. He used to be in a band called Contusion. It's a quartet recording with him and the drummer from that band, and keyboardist and bass player from probably Argentina's best fusion band, Commodore. I know Eric has heard this one too. It's more like a more rocking Holdsworth. He's a Holdsworth kind of player, but the tunes are not like Holdsworth tunes. It's a more rocking quartet fusion kind of feel. What'd you think of it, Eric?
Kind of the same. I mean, obviously Holdsworth comes to mind right out of the gate, and I've just had a couple listens. I think you posted it, and I went back and gave it a quick listen this morning too, to a couple of the tracks, and that's what stands out. I mean, I love guitar. That's usually my focus. The stuff that I've been listening to and the stuff you've been kind of giving me. But he's fantastic. He's a great player. Holdsworth will definitely come to mind, but I think, like you said, it's maybe a little heavier or more rocking than some of the Holdsworth stuff. I think it's not as angular maybe as Holdsworth's music, but I enjoy it. And obviously I need more time with it, but it's a good record for sure.
So I'm intrigued because I'm a big Holdsworth fan, but I will say that a lot of his solo stuff is very ethereal, atmospheric, and kind of like sort of obtuse, right? And there's not rhythm guitar and all that kind of stuff, riffs, things like that, and not really happening. So but the solos are amazing. So if this guy has got more of that other stuff that I just mentioned, that sounds like some right up my alley.
Yeah, I think I haven't pushed it on you because it's one of these digital only deals, Bandcamp kind of a thing. Also, two that just came out, so I haven't had time to sit with them, just one listen a piece. Tim Miller, Synergy. He's a professor of guitar at Berkeley. It's produced by Steve Hunt. This is more like Holdsworth writing to the max, and as a player, he's in that vein also. It's very similar to his other stuff from what I heard on the first pass, but just wanted to put it on people's radars if you know him. Also, a new band called The Trackers, which is Gary Husband's new thing. It's a duo with him and a Norwegian guitar player named Alf Hawa, rotating bass chair with Mark King, Etienne Mbappe, Jimmy Johnson, Jimmy Haslip, a couple other guys. But again, I've had only one pass at that, but it's something to check out for people that like to go on Bandcamp. That will be a copy for people that like the hard copy, but that's pretty much all I know of on the new release front so far this year.
Sorry about all the barking in the background here. It's a little chaotic at the Pardo house today. Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking that stuff out, and we will definitely put the names of these albums and artists in the comments below, so everybody has can go and check them out. So, Eric, you want to introduce us to the 4 albums we're going to talk about today?
Absolutely. So the concept George came up with was based on your concept for March for the daily albums. So George wanted to go with the theme of 1992 for fusion releases, and this one really appealed to me because they're all great guitar players. So we have 4 albums. We have Kazumi Watanabe, Pandora, Brand X, Excommunication, Tribal Tech, Illicit, which I believe, Pete, you just talked about this week in your rankings. And the last one is Shawn Lane, Powers of 10. So those are the 4 releases we are ranking, all 3 of us, from 1992.
Yeah, what's funny is I've talked about 3 of them this month in the month-long show, and the only reason I didn't talk about the 4th one is because I kind of like forgot about it, which shame on me, right? It's like, but all 4 of them belong to be discussed this month or any month. So it's actually kind of cool that we're tying them all in. All some great fusion releases from 1992. So I don't know which one you want to start on first, guys.
Well, I think we go around typical ranking show style, 4 to 1. So
Okay.
why don't you kick it off, Eric?
Okay, well, I'm the newbie, and I've said this on a couple shows, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but George has really been getting me into this. And I'm really excited about this because I think I had listened to a lot of the classic bands, but I know this channel covers a lot of ground, and obviously fusion makes its way in the prog seat and others. But I do think this music, if people are looking for something different, I mean, there's a world, it's amazing how many releases there are. So when George and I started talking about this idea, and then he came up with 92, I was really excited. So my number 4, and I've heard this on a number of rankings, and Pete, I think you even said this on your Tea Party ranking, there's not a bad release here. So just because we're putting something at 4 doesn't mean it's just kind of our personal opinion. My number 4 is going to be Pandora by Kazumi Watanabe. And again, I know he's got a ton of releases. The only reason I put this at 4, I really enjoy it. I enjoy his playing. It's kind of the least edgy to me. And it might be the most of its time, I think, in terms of he uses a lot of heavy compression. There's a lot of chorused sounds on his guitar. And there's a couple tracks where, and George, you know, I'd probably being a drummer, there's like this really, that noise gate they use on the snare where it's just a different, it's probably more of the sound and the way it was produced in that time. I find it the least aggressive maybe of the 4 releases we reviewed. And just right now, that's kind of been my thing. I really like the heavier fusion, but he's a great player. One of my favorite tracks actually features mostly violin, and I can't pronounce the name of it, but it's track 9. There's a lot of violin in that track. And even some of the lighter stuff, when it does get to his soloing is fantastic. And he does kind of go back and forth between clean sounds and more aggressive, distorted sounds. But that's where I'm going to start with number 4.
Cool. George, you want to go next? Or you want me to go?
I'll go.
Okay.
This was hard. I looked at it and I'm like, what jerk picked these 4 albums? And I'm like, oh wait, that was me. But
for once, I don't have to take control of that one, right?
Yeah.
No responsibility on my end.
Obviously, all 4 of them have top of the line material. So I looked at this a little bit like, which of these has maybe a couple of skip it songs for me? And the only one that kind of does is Illicit. A couple of these, this is when they started the improv thing, and a couple of them are real nothing's happening kind of songs, kind of drifty, and they're both kind of long. You got Paha Sapa and Riot, Aftermath. I mean, they're sometimes something you might be wanting to listen to, but sometimes it's just like, where's the skip button? And I really don't have tracks like that on the other albums, or at best 1. So as good as the good stuff on this is, which is over the top good, I will say I just, by the smallest of margins, I put this at number 4.
Yeah, there's not much that separates these at all. I'm going to go with Excommunication as my number 4. It's not one of my favorite Brand X's. I like it a lot. I like some of those classic ones from the 70s a bit more. I really miss the keyboards on this album for me, because like in my mind, keys is just as much important as guitar in Brand X's music. That being said, there's some ferocious good soul playing on this album. Not nuts about the guitar synthy stuff he's doing here, but you know, whatever. It's not overused. The drumming is fantastic. There's some great tracks on here. Kluzinski Period is amazing. A Duck Exploding is amazing. Xanax Taxi. It's really good. It's really aggressive. This is more like kind of power trio Brand X, which I'm totally fine with. I do miss the keyboards, like I said, but it's a fantastic album. Something's got to come in at number 4. That's going to be it for me. Back to Eric.
All right, you might as well keep holding that up, because that's what I'm going with my number 3. And I think all the points you made, Pete, are kind of where I'm at. I'm not a big fan of the guitar synth. The one thing I really do like is I feel like it's a very aggressive Brand X record in comparison to some of their other stuff. It's really heavy, which I think you get, like you said, power trio, basically. I didn't know, or I don't know if I have anything else with that drummer, Frank Katz, but he's terrific on the record. And I wanted to point out, because I don't know that I hear it that much, but I think it's the first track, Xanax Taxi. Good Soul, he usually is, you know, he almost can sound like he's off the rails a bit in a good way. I mean, like, you know, he just kind of goes for broke. It's almost like not a composed soloing a lot of times when he does it. But in this track, he has a clean solo that it's almost more of a traditional jazz in that section. And I loved his clean playing in that. And I'm like, I don't hear him do that a lot. And that really appealed to me. I really liked that track. But again, I think, and you mentioned the keyboards. I do miss the keyboards in that band, because that's kind of an identifiable thing. I think up to that point, you know, they'd always had a keyboard player. And and again, great record. We're not knocking any of these. But again, that comes in as my number 3. Just, I do miss more of that fuller Brand X sound, I think, from that record.
I'll keep the chain going. My number 3, Excommunication. In a normal world, I like Tribal Tech more than Brand X. The only way this edged it out was because for me, this is my favorite Brand X album, actually.
Wow.
I like when it came out, I was blown away by the heavier approach, and I didn't mind the keyboards because for me, people tuned into Brand X for Goodzall and Percy anyway. And the new drummer, Frank Katz, he's a monster. I mean, I think he was a Berkeley instructor. He may maybe still be, I don't know. He kind of fell off the map. He's on the album after this, and then he was in Percy's band Tunnels in parallel but after that, he kind of fallen off for me. But yeah, Liquid Time, Mental Floss, those are two of my favorite tunes on here. Just the whole way through, I just like the approach of this thing. I can't put my thumb on it, but it's my number 3.
Yeah, and we haven't really talked about him, but Percy Jones is amazing on that record. He's amazing on every album he ever appears on, right? I mean, that guy's just so smooth and velvety. It's such a great player.
You hear him, you know him.
Yeah. Very identifiable sound. Yep.
And what's his new band? It's like M12 or something. He's
got
there's Box of Frogs or something,
and Pact,
that's right.
He's a busy dude.
He's all over the place. Over the place. All right, I'm going to go with Pandora for my number 3. Almost ranked it higher. This is really tasty stuff. One of the things I really like about this album in comparison to the other 3 is that this just sounds so different. I mean, I love the kind of Southeast Asian motifs and flavors all throughout this. I mean, it's just and like Eric said, it's definitely from its time. The way it's recorded, it sounds like either late 80s or early 90s recording, but I don't mind it too much. I love all of his guitar tones on here. He's such a special player, and he doesn't sound like anybody else. And the rhythms are really good on here. I love the percussion. I mean, there's some just fantastic songs on here. Dr. Mambo X, Firecracker is just spectacular. The title track is great. It's just such a weird, different listen for Fusion, and it's just amazing how, this guy, he's got a lot of albums, a ton of them, and I've heard so many that I really like a lot, but nobody else sounds like him. It's like he comes from this part of the world where, fusion music is, at least over here in North America, doesn't get recognized. And if you want something a little bit different with great musicianship, a lot of different guitar tones, and stylistically, it's kind of all over the place from track to track. Really, really good. It was good to I hadn't heard this one in a while, and it was good to kind of pull it out and re-listen to it again. And I just love his stuff. Great player.
Now, do both of you have a lot of his stuff?
I've got, I think of his solo albums, I've got maybe like 4 or 5. And then I got a bunch of things I picked up from Ken Golden recently that he appeared on like way before this stuff, like all those like really rare Japanese albums that he was on, and these jazz and fusion things. And he sounds really different, but he sounds really cool. I mean, I think his discography is like 50, 70 albums, something like that, at least. Huge. Yeah.
I want to say I have like 15 or 20.
Oh, you got way more than me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I probably don't scratch the surface either. I mean, there's a lot out there.
I have those Mobo albums.
Which ones? All the Mobo? I got all those.
Those are great.
Yeah.
I had a couple of them on cassette. I've never replaced them on CD. I probably should, but I remember one of them. It's like basically the music and the rhythms are all like this reggae stuff, and he's just shredding balls on top of all of it. It's just really, really weird, interesting stuff. He's such a great player. He's done so much different stuff.
He's kind of like McLaughlin, where he gets into a style for 3 or 4 albums, and then he's like, I'm tired of this. Now I'm going to do this other thing that's like, with other guys. That's way different.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good to know, because I think I obviously, and like you said, Pete, it is there's a lot of variation in that record, but I do need to pick up some more stuff from him. So it's nice to know he's got, different things going on, I guess, probably as you go through different periods. So I'll have to check some more stuff out from him.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. My number 2, this is probably my favorite guitar player of the 4, and probably between Brand X. I've seen Brand X a number of times. And the band that I was most familiar with would be Brand X, but these guys are right behind him. It's Tribal Tech Illicit. And when George mentioned this one, I didn't own this. So I picked this up about a month ago when we started talking about it. And I really kind of enjoyed the first track where And I don't know that I would have got it, but George is like, hey, did you pick up what's going on in the opening of that first track? And I'm like, well, yeah, it's kind of soft or whatever. And he said that was kind of their joke on, and it probably goes along with they have the warning label here, but it's like this soft jazz, smooth jazz kind of opening. And then all of a sudden they punch you in the face with that first track. But I think I agree with George. The first 6 tracks on this are unbelievable. They kill me. And then it kind of falls off. I think, is it Riot is one of the improvs, and then the closing Aftermath, and they just seem to kind of meander to me. I'm sure they were probably better live, because when you're there and you're experiencing the music, but when you have to listen to it over and over again, they just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of, they probably like you, but George, where they might be skip tracks, but the first 6, this probably contains my favorite tracks of any of the 4, but because I'm seeing maybe 2 or 3 songs on this record as ones that I'd be like, it can't be my number 1, but it's still a fantastic album. And like I said, Scott's probably my favorite player of the 4. I just love his tone and I love his playing. So that's my number 2, Tribal Tech Illicit.
Back to George.
My number 2, Kazumi, Pandora. This is
Uh-oh, is George frozen?
We got a freeze.
Uh-oh. Frozen solid. While George is frozen, I will show you the guys from the Kazumi Watanabe band on here. And I will mention we've got Vagabondi Suzuki on bass, Rikia Higashihara on drums, and Tomohiro Yahiro on percussion, along with Kazumi Watanabe on guitars, charango, and synthesizer. So
now, have you seen any? I'm sure you've seen Brand X, but have you seen any of the other ones live?
I haven't seen any of these guys live.
Okay.
None. Zero. Yeah.
Oh, you never saw Brand X?
You know what? I've had so many chances to see Brand X, and it's just never happened. Every time that they're playing around and they've been close, I've got something else going on. So it's and now it's it's too late, obviously. So yeah, that's one of those regret things, right? You have these bands that you had a chance to see, and it just doesn't happen. And what are you gonna do?
Because they came around a lot, probably what was it, 15 or 16 when they reformed?
Yeah.
And I saw them, and they played a bunch of different places. I saw them at Cahoe's Music Hall. I saw them at the Strand up in Hudson Falls. The Egg they played at. And I actually had tickets to see them in a club in Saratoga in October, which they had to cancel when John got sick and then unfortunately obviously passed. But it was absolutely probably 4 or 5 times. And again, that's the only band I've seen of this crew. And just so disappointing, and rest in peace, John. But great shows. I mean, they really came back strong. I mean, I think they put out a couple live albums too. So just great to see them, get that chance.
Yeah. They played, again, I guess this was right before the pandemic, because they were touring pretty hard right about that time. They played the Town Crier in Beacon, which is like 2 towns over from me. And it was just, and I was going to go, and I didn't buy a ticket, but I was like, I'm just going to get a ticket last minute and just go. And then something else came up and I didn't go. And then, now he's gone. So that's basically it for Brand X.
And Daryl's house too, right? I think they've been at Daryl's house at least once.
Oh yeah. They played at Daryl's house too. So I'm not sure what's going on with George. Hopefully he didn't lose his internet or have some kind of an outage or something, which could be, happens.
Did we get your number 2?
No, but I can do my number 2.
Yeah, why don't you do your number 2? And then when George comes back, he'll.
Yeah. First time show jitters, folks. These things happen, right? All right. So I'm going to go with The Powers of 10 by Shawn Lane. And something you said a little while ago, Eric, about certain albums having certain songs that you love so much could elevate them above others, where, that's like sometimes I had to think of my number 1 and 2, which could flip flop at any time. But I think my number 1 has more overall songs that I just love Here Comes George. And this has probably the most jaw-dropping playing out of any of these albums. I mean, Shawn Lane is just an absolute monster. There's a couple tracks on here that I don't particularly care for, and then there's tracks on here that I think are just like godly. So I just had to put the two together, and I'm like, all right, I got to pick one. I think, like I said, this has some of the most amazing playing. It's all him for the most part, but I'm going to go with another in my number one, just because I think there's just some really special tracks to me, but this could easily be number one. I mean, God, the technique of this cat is just like off the charts on here. There's just never been anybody as mind blowing as this dude. So with that being said, George is back, and I'll let him get back to his number two. And
I lost my internet. I don't know. Yeah, I was just going to say that amongst Kazumi's stuff, this is one of my favorites. I don't know if it is my favorite, but it's up there. And yeah, he's just a great bunch of songs. And really on here, there's nothing I skip. There's even a song where he made accordion sound good. I mean, the guy who plays accordion is just ripping, pretty incredible. And like Eric said, the violin, guesting on violin, that guy's great. I mean, they just put it all together on that one.
George, for you, how does that album stack up against the Spice of Life stuff?
I like it a little better. I like these guys a little better.
Yeah, you would think that wouldn't be the case, right? But I think for me, I love those albums, but I think that Kazumi is a little more reserved because he's sharing the spotlight with those other dudes.
Yeah.
And here this is more of him, right? I guess. I don't know.
Those kind of have that more 80s, Bruford's playing pads, and it's got a little more, it's not as raw as these guys are.
Yeah, I would agree. Cool. All right, Eric, the number one, drum roll. I think we know what it's going to be.
I'm a little embarrassed by my number one, because obviously Shawn Lane, I'm going with Powers of 10 as my number one. Huge name. I mean, I knew his name. I'd heard about him for years. I never had anything. And again, when George brought this topic up and he hooked me up with this one, and just reading about it. So like you said, Pete, I believe he plays everything on this. And he did. The only thing I find disappointing is drum machine, which he did a great job on. I mean, there's a few sections where again, and I don't know why, but I'm complaining about snare sounds today. But there's a couple songs where there's some snare sounds that just seem a little too out there for me. And, sometimes it can get a little stiff with a drum machine. But his playing is off the charts. He is just an unbelievable player, even though I think I like Scott more in terms of just listening, but Shawn Lane is unmatched in terms of talent. And to think he plays the keyboards just as amazingly as he plays guitar is another one that just blew me away. And from this one, I get a lot of Steve Morse on the first 3 or 4 tracks. A lot of that stuff seems very reminiscent of Steve Morse. And I had mentioned that to George, and I guess, Steve Morse was an influence on Shawn. The only thing here, like I said, I think each of these albums has a little, we talked about the meandering and the tribal tech. And in this one, it's the actual title track, Powers of 10 Suite, and then the piano concerto. They kind of like, the album is going and it's aggressive and bright at times and really good. For some reason, those 2 tracks just like kill the momentum of the album for me. They're great. And when you think that he did this all himself, that blows me away when I listen to them, and I'm actually sitting and listening to them. But to be honest, those are 2 tracks that I prefer to skip or have as bonus tracks and go right into, I forget what track, is it Paris and then Esperanto. And then he gets right back on track. And I love the closing, the acoustic track with, it's kind of an atmospheric keyboard, and he's just playing some acoustic guitar. I think it's a pretty quick, maybe a 3-minute track, but that's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful song. And unmatched in terms of talent, and unfortunately he left us much too soon as well. But great player, great record. It's absolutely fantastic. The guitar playing, if that's your thing, he'll blow you away, guaranteed.
Yeah.
And the 2 tracks you talked about is also the reason why it was my number 2 and not my number 1.
It's my number one. And I can address a couple of things you said, Eric. The the drumming thing was a budget deal. This is on Warner Brothers. He's probably very fortunate that he got signed at all to Warner Brothers. So, he had a limited budget.
Okay.
That's why he decided to do it all himself. It's drum kind of similar to what Future Man does with the Flecktones. He actually physically played the drums, but it's just on keyboard.
Oh, okay.
So, the limitations of a 92 sample drum sounds.
Sure.
It is what it is. And the classical pieces, I agree. I love them, but I agree that they shouldn't be in smack dab in the middle of the album. I think they should have been put last. That little guitar piece is for his sister. She died young in a car crash.
Oh.
Very sad, but yeah, super melodic. I hear a little Eric Johnson in him too, and he's friends with Eric, so that makes sense. Paris is like the crazy bop piece. Love the bass line in that. That he can pull that off, not being a bass player really by trade. It's amazing. And yeah, some of these other tunes, Rules of the Game, he wrote in one night. He just said, I'm going to sit down and write a song in one sitting. And that's what he came out with. It's kind of crazy.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of this stuff was around. There's demos, a lot of this stuff going back to the early 80s. So he really worked on this a long time. And then when he got signed, he put it all together. It's really a landmark album, actually. So that's my
And it's crazy. The fact that this album came out on Warner Brothers is just like mind boggling.
Yeah. Needless to say, they didn't promote it and it didn't go anywhere.
It died a quick death. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Was that all? Was he dropped after that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The second album was an indie release like 7 years later. I mean,
Okay.
And I would say, Eric, if you really dig this stuff, the Powers of 10 live is just mind blowing.
Okay.
Yeah, that and the albums that he did with Jonas Hellborg are exceptional, but again, not as composed. I find a lot of that stuff is kind of really jammy, but amazing jammy.
That's the other side, the more extreme playing side, and
yeah,
go for the throat. That version I've heard you talk about the version that you ended up buying, Pete, that with the other guys on two tunes. That's a reissue. I never actually heard those.
No, I'm glad I bought them when I did. I guess, right?
Yeah.
All right, my number one, Illicits. I have a real soft spot for this band, and I've been listening to them since they first came out. And I agree with you though. The first like 80% of this album is just ripping. I don't mind the last two tracks. So the last three are kind of it's like Paha Sapa, Babylon Aftermath, even a little bit of Riot. They're kind of like moody and atmospheric and meditative, and just like there's like their normal power is kind of like sitting and bubbling below the surface, right? It's like on simmer. I don't mind it though, because I don't mind the improv-y stuff. But for me, it's number one because the first like 5, 6, 7 songs are just like just so explosive. I mean, the Big Wave and Stupid, Black Cherry Torque is just like, man, just so good. And this was such a great band. This should have been a really, I think in the 80s, Chicks Band, the electric band, got like, all the acclaim of like being like one of the must-see fusion bands of the era. But I think Tribal Tech were right up there as well as far as like talent and really strong albums. And they just, they never really broke through, unfortunately. But yeah, I dig this album a lot. It's one of my favorite Tribal Techs. It's ranks up there for me, and it's my number one.
Cool.
It's
nice to see some different choices. So, mix it up a bit.
I kind of expected it because there's so little to separate these albums. I mean,
yeah. I think the point of the whole thing is that all 4 of these are really great, and there isn't much that separates them. So for folks watching, we all kind of rank them a little bit differently, but they're all worth your time if you haven't already heard them. And it's kind of cool. I mean, and there's probably, God, are there any others we could have if we went beyond the 4 category? We got Steve Morse. We mentioned Steve Morse before. I mean, he released a really, really killer album in '92, although maybe not so much fusion, right? It's more of like instrumental guitar rock, so to speak. But Yeah. So we will be coming up with, I mean, George, I don't know if you want to expand a little bit on the criteria of what we're going to be doing going forward and how, what are some of the things that will be tying these albums together if I didn't hit on all of them at the beginning.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's based on actually a Fusion Friday listening post that Eric does. And you would always have 4 albums in a grid. And I started thinking, his are never organized. So I was like, well, what if the 4 albums were linked in some way? So you got year of release. I thought maybe like a common sideman, like Holdsworth, or one of these guys that plays on a lot of records like Chambers or something. That might be interesting. Or
Yeah.
basically what it'll be is just, yeah, some commonly linked theme, 4 albums, just make for talking about some records, which is what we like to do around here.
Oh yeah. 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 That's what we're known for, right? Talking about ranking and just album discussions, right? Because we love albums. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to this. So we'll be as far as like, so obviously it's the first, right? So what we may do is we may just air this episode the first Friday of every month, and just that's what we'll do. So 4Fusion Fridays. I like it. So everybody watching, let us know what you think of these 4 spectacular fusion albums. And if you have any ideas of things we can do in the future on this monthly program, let us know. But you'll be getting next month, first Friday of next month, you'll be getting another 4. We'll talk about them, we'll rank them, and we'll give you some insight into some new stuff that you should be checking out, because I think it's very important that we talk about the new and the old. That's what it's all about.
Then we should, to close things out, Pete, I think to get some people involved, including me and you, we want to do a little George's picks, because George digs into his bag of obscurity and pulls something out that's always fantastic, but a lot of us have never heard of. So George is going to give us a recommendation for something to listen to and come back to for the next show.
Yep.
All right. Well, the first one, as you guys know, if you opened your mail yesterday, it's going to be Gentle Hearts from Tetsuo Sakurai. This is a 2001 release. There's one follow-up from 2010, I believe, with this lineup. He's another guy like Kazumi that goes way back in the Japanese fusion scene. He was in one of their biggest bands, Cassiopeia, which is a little light compared to what we like. But some of his solo albums are ferocious. I think this one is, but I'd like to see what you guys think and see what the viewers think. If they've heard of it, and if they haven't, check it out.
Cool. Sounds good. So stay tuned next month for more on that later, right? So cool. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. This inaugural episode of 4Fusion Friday. 4Fusion Friday for Eric Porter and George Lamie. I am Pete Pardo. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube. All together, all the damn time. So take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a great weekend. We'll see you tomorrow with the UK Connection and Sunday with album homework assignment. So till then, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.